Okay, we have this batch boiling. I see 12 minutes up here left on this cooker. So I'm going to go 10 minutes off the cooker. When there's 2 minutes left on the pressure cooker, we'll know these potatoes are done. In the meanwhile, I'm starting a batch of Ucon Gold, which we haven't done before. These are Ucon Gold. You see I've kept out some nicer ones. This is our box of Ucon Gold, and I'll do 12 pounds, maybe, so to make sure we have enough for 18 pints, I'm going to do 14 pounds of potatoes. Right now I have 12 on there, and I'll add 2. We'll start peeling. Okay, we're still peeling here, and I'm just noticing a white russet potato in the box with the yellow. You can see a difference in flesh. One is creamy and one is white. Here's a red potato. So we had 2 different kinds of red potatoes. We had Norlands and Pontiacs, and then we had Yukon Gold, and then the Russet. And both the Russet and the red potatoes all have white flesh. And the Yukon Gold has a creamy yellow colored flesh. Okay, so the pressure cooker is done. Turn the heat off. Get these off the burner. Okay, we'll slide this pressure cooker off of its burner. Then we've got a pot of water we're going to set on to boil. It's almost boiling. I'm just going to put it back on here. And we're setting out jars. Let's see. I'm going to do 18 pints. Dump this off into the strainer. Get all that hot water off those potatoes so they don't continue to cook. That looks good. And then begin filling these jars. Oh, I thought I'd rinse this first, get that starch off of there. In fact, I'm going to hang on here just a second. So I went and grabbed a jar. This is a pint jar of red potatoes. You can see how thick it is. It's just like jelly in there, because we use the water off of the cooker, the cooking pan. The water that we cooked the potatoes in went into the jar, and some of the last jars had the thickest amount of starch. It's very jelly-like. Instead of doing that, I mean, this doesn't really hurt anything, but some people don't like that the jar looks milky and that the liquid around the potatoes, where it's cool like this, is very gelled. So we're going to knock that starch off just by rinsing. And then we'll fill these pints. Even the pints need 1-inch headspace. Yep, like that. We want things to stay really hot. Plenty warm it is. Okay, let's put some more potatoes in the pan and rinse them. That starts off there. Very hot water. Ooh, nice and warm. We turned our hot water heater up a notch. Just last week, the plumber installed a pressure tank on our hot water heater so that the pressure relief valve doesn't go off when the pressure gets too hot. Which I don't know if it had ever done it, but he said it was best to have one, so we put one on there. We also installed a hot water whole house circulating pump, which will be really nice. Now we don't have to wait a minute and a half or two and run gallons of water down the drain every morning when we're trying to get up and moving and you want to wash your face or comb your hair. The water is instantly hot in the faucet now. The circulating pump is on a timer, so it doesn't run all night. It can turn off during the day if you're at work. It has a timer that has multiple, I think it's 7-day, multiple functions per day type of a timer. Slide those out of the way and keep filling. Got a few more jars to go. Okay. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We need a few more. Funnel up there. Okay, these need to be rinsed. Got starch all over my hands when they feel slimy. Rinse that starch through. We only need to fill 3 more jars or 4 more jars, so we have plenty of potatoes. Alright, stop right there for a second. Rinse my fingers. We're going to knock these potatoes down. They'll settle in the jar like that, so we can add a few more to each of the jars. The rule is 1 inch of headspace, which is the bottom of the threads. I have just a few potatoes from the previous batch that we can use to fill the top of the jar. There's a few more here. A couple more on that one. Okay, that looks good. How many do we have? There's 12. 3 times 4 is 12. 13, 14, 15, 16. We actually have a need for a couple more jars. Okay, I found some more lids. I forgot what I was doing here. The camera was running. Alright, so pull that down. The 2 jars where I put the potatoes from the fridge in the jar, I set those in the boiling water here, and they'll be heating up a little more to equal what the temperature is in these jars. And then before I put it in the canner, we'll release the pressure. Like that. Okay, let's back up here. I've got another canner out now. This is an American-made canner with a steel cone seal. We're going to take that divider out. Put water in there. That ought to be enough, just about an inch. And then all of the jars will push that up to about 2 inches. And if not, I'll add some more water to equal 2 inches. Go. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. And we'll set the spacer on top of that. Up on top of those jars. Let's see if that works. Come on. Up there. Yep, that works. Check that water level. Do that using a knife down the edge, and it looks like we're only about 1.5 inches, so I'm going to add some more water down in there so that it's about half of the way up a pint jar. And I'll test it again. That's perfect. 2 to 2.5 inches of water in the bottom of the canner, so that the water level is about up to here on the pint jar, on the lower level. Okay, turn that burner all the way up, and we'll put the lid on. Let's see if we can find the label. There's the label. There's a notch right here in the side of the canner, and then this guy right here needs to line up on that side right there, and that'll all lock around to line up to where they all line up. Yep, perfect. Let's back up just a touch. These need to tighten down evenly so that the cone isn't lopsided, fitting down inside of the pan. Come on. Like that. All right. Like that. Feels good. The burner is all the way up, and we'll wait for pressure to come up. Once it starts to boil and steam, then I'll close it, leave that open for a second, let it steam. Once it gets to boiling, then we'll pop that closed like that. And this will start to come up, and you can see 10 pounds is showing on the gauge there. All right, this side. This canner still isn't quite down to 0. Come on, focus, buddy. Not sure why it can't. So there it goes. So we're 2 or 3 pounds still, and it's just taking a few minutes. I wouldn't bobble this. I would let that come all the way down to 0. And then we can take the Presto weight off of the petcock back there. In the meanwhile, we'll let this continue to cool and continue peeling Ucon Gold potatoes. Okay, I can hear this boiling, and if you lift it, then it releases the pressure, so we don't want to do that. We're going to leave it over, and that closes it, and the pressure will begin to build. All right, the pressure is up to 5 pounds here. This one's down to 0, so we're going to go ahead and pull this up and release any more pressure that there might be sitting there in the pan. Give that a couple of seconds. Yeah, I can't feel any steam coming out of that little port right there. If it was blowing wet steam, then I would worry. But we're totally at 0, so now we're going to open the, just pull the top, hold the back, and pull the top so that it turns. You can see it turning. It's hard to do with one hand here. Okay, so I'm going to turn it. You can see the top turns back. Just open it just a touch and let some of that steam come out for just a few minutes. Let that sit for 4 or 5 minutes. Relax before we take the lid completely off and start pulling jars out. This gauge is up to 10 pounds pressure. The pot is still expanding. I can see a little steam coming out here, but remember, this is not a gasket system. This is just a steel cone inside of a steel pan, and it expands with heat to seal. And yet we're still up to 10 pounds pressure. So now I'm going to turn this down, turn that heat off, and keep that from going too much higher. It's probably on the 11 pound side. This has been sitting here long enough now. But I'll feel comfortable about pulling these jars out. Look nice. Looks really nice. Yeah, these look great. They'll cool and seal. We got them labeled. We'll take these other ones back here that have cooled now for a couple of hours out to where they're not in our way. This can set down because I'm going to put a pot of water here that will set to boil and get ready for boiling our Ucon Gold potatoes. Okay, gauge is holding just a little over 10 pounds. We've got it less than medium over there on the stove dial. That's not hurting anything. And we've got about 15 minutes left. In the meanwhile, we've been peeling Ucon Gold, and I have 11¼ pounds of peeled potatoes. And I'd say about 3 pounds. Let's measure that. Okay, so these are the Ucon Gold peelings, and there's 2½ pounds, a little over 2½ pounds. So about 14 pounds of potatoes total right there. We'll hopefully fill our 18 pints. Don't quite need that much for 7 quarts. All right, all the Ucon, almost all the Ucon Gold are sliced. And we're Just 50 seconds away from finishing this canner of pints. And what's in there are the red potatoes. We've done 2 canners of quart red potatoes. You see they're not red, they're white potatoes inside, but the outside skins are Norland and Pontiac Reds is what we grew this year. Two, 1, 0. All right, turn the timer off. Turn the burner off. We're also burning cooking holiday aroma on the simmer. Take just a second, slide that off of the burner. It's a little bit warm. It doesn't have the plastic handles like the other does. And what we'll do is slide this over. Turn that burner back on and get this water boiling for the potatoes to cook. As that's preparing to cook potatoes, this can be cooling down. Okay. Cover those up with boiling water. Those are the Ucon Gold. We'll bring that up to, the water was just beginning to boil, but I had just finished peeling the potatoes, and we'll dump them in here and bring the water back up to a boil and boil for 10 minutes. This pressure cooker is down to 5 pounds pressure, just sitting here cooling off. In the meanwhile, we had mixed up 3 or 4 potatoes, white russet potatoes, in the same box with the Ucon Gold, and I'm not going to cook them together. I'm actually going to cook these in a pan that'll probably fit in 1 pint. Like that. I'll set this on the back burner, and when this gets closer to a boil, I'll turn that on because that will boil very quickly, and then we'll time them both for 10 minutes. Okay, so this is starting to boil. We're setting the kitchen timer at 10 minutes. Start. This will boil in seconds because it's just such a small pan, and we'll time them both together. I'll actually turn this one down a little bit so it doesn't have to froth and boil so hard. And we should stir that so it doesn't scald on the bottom. I forget. Should do that a couple of times during this boiling process to keep those from sticking to the bottom. These are Ucon Gold, aren't they pretty? Golden flesh tomato potatoes. Alright, that ought to do. Turn that down to medium. I'm going to set this other canner off to a different spot so I can start boiling water to fill the jars. Okay, I rinsed some more jars for the next batch, and the timer's winding down. 10 seconds left on these boiling potatoes. Turn that off and turn the front burner off there. Okay, let's pull these off the burner. Get them into the jars. Set that off to the side for just a minute. I'm going to pull these out. also nice and warm. Probably doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's nice if the jar is warm. The warm jar won't subtract from the heat of the product. I'm trying to keep the heat in the jar. Very good. Rinse these. Those are pretty. Pretty golden potatoes. All right, let's come a little closer. Let's rinse the starch off. We got our funnel and begin filling these jars. They look buttery and they don't have any butter on them. They're already yellow. That's fun. Whew, those are hot. Okay. Just a few more. Fill up a jar. That's good for that one. Plenty warm. Oh, that's too much. Okay, that's pretty hot. Get your fingers very stuck in. These seem to be just a little bit softer in texture. Let's find a piece and we'll test it. One of the larger pieces is still pretty firm. It's gonna break. Yeah, that's still pretty firm. I like it. Soft enough to mash, yet firm enough to hold its shape. That's perfect. All right, let's move these over. Continue filling these jars. So warm. There we go. A little bit messy. Probably doesn't have to be, but this is the faster way to do it. I'm sure I could spoon feed each of these through the... It would take a little longer. Okay, now the remainder. Rinse those off. Like our jar water is boiling already. I need to rinse my fingers off too. It's really slimy with the starch. Okay, so we have 1 jar of whites. Let's go ahead and do these 2 so I can use this to rinse. settle the jars. Just down here on the bottom. And use up the remainder of these. That's perfect. That's good. A few more in that one. We'll pick up around ones I dropped. Let's take a look. We may want to eliminate, well, let's see what happens with this jar of whites. Rinse those. See if there's enough to actually fill the jar. Oh yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect. In fact, we got too many. We got just a little too much. Yep. So I'll spill over into one of these that needs more. That's good. Some of these aren't perfectly full. You know what I might do is just eliminate one jar and fill the rest of these up and save a lid.